Oh, I'm live already, apparently. Right then. Well, welcome all of you to a slightly different way of doing this tonight. Fortunately, you've been spared having to stare at Richard there, saying hi and welcoming you all to this. It's just me and my daft setup with a web camera and that here. We thought we'd try putting it direct to YouTube to see how well it went, and to save the time it was taken to upload them to YouTube afterwards. If it doesn't work for you all, then please do let myself or Richard know. If you have any problems, tap into the question and answer box there. I see, Dave, you've already got the hang of it. You can ask questions in there. I can see it at this very moment, but once I tab away and start going to different applications and that, it'll probably get buried under Windows. So, by all means, ask Richard or leave stuff in there and we'll get back to it later on if I can. If my audio or anything drops out or the video drops out, please do tell Richard or myself, because I'm not entirely sure how this is going. I'm getting daft messages from YouTube's control panel that's in front of me saying this is not working and that's not working, but nobody's jumping up and down and screaming at me yet, and it says I have a green light on an excellent connection. As you may have noticed as well, I'm already quite prepared this evening, so that's a bit of a bonus, probably because I haven't been busy gabbing. Okay, without further ado, we will get started on tonight's topic, which is one I'm sure you've all been waiting for, and that is 3D. So, basically, we're going to cover some of the 3D features that are available in QGIS. Up until now, all we've done is very simple stuff. Drawing polygons, adding attributes to those polygons, setting up different colours and things like that. Now, if you recall back in the last session, I went into some depth about attributes. And the reason for that is because attributes are quite important when it comes to doing 3D inside QGIS. Now, QGIS has two different ways of doing 3D. What I'm actually going to do, I know this might seem like a silly thing, but I'm going to open another version of QGIS in the background, and I'm going to show you the different types of 3D using two different versions, and there's a reason for that. The first method, which is built into QGIS itself, will not work at the same time as the second method. Or more's the point, if you use the second method in a project, then go to the first method will tell you that it can't be opened, or it won't work, or it can't do things that way. Now, the first method is simply just to use the new 3D map view. Yep. And it really is very, very simple. It's designed to give you an idea of what your geometry might be like in 3D. And it's pretty simple to use. It doesn't really have a huge amount of capabilities. If we start a new project, and we'll go and find something to load in. So let's have a look. Go and have a nose in my documents folder. Here we go. So let's pull out our standard company buildings layer. This is the one that goes, why is that, I wonder? Right, that's interesting, considering that I actually have that loaded in the other copy that's running behind, unless the other copy has decided it doesn't want to share. Let's see if I can load this one in. Oh no. Okay. That is weird. That is very weird. Right, well, we're not unaccustomed to QGIS making a mockery of me when I'm trying to show you all how to do this. It'll not be the first time. I doubt very much it'll be the last time. So I guess what I'm probably going to have to do is bin that second copy. I will save this project temporarily, then that way I can reload it back in fairly quickly if I close and reopen this. So we'll just save that as concert mapping session 5 conceit even. That'll do for now. Right, so going back to what I was on about, the new 3D view, if we just pop that open, should open a window like this. And like any other window in QGIS, this can actually be docked and what have you. I wouldn't advise it because docking it tends to get a bit weird. It's not the fastest of things, and you can see there that, well, that was because it was rather zoomed in. What it's actually done there is it's requested the entire raster source of the tiles that are behind it all in one go, and it's trying to draw them with the path of least resistance, the smallest one. There you can see it refining it on the area that was zoomed into. This is the other disadvantage of using the built-in 3D mode, by the way. It's not particularly fast, but it's good for quick visualizations. Once it's got the imagery that it wants and cached them, it's usually not too bad to work with. We'll go down here to a slightly simpler area, and hopefully, is it going to improve? I don't think it is. So what we're going to do, we'll just move that out the way a minute. The other thing with the 3D map view is it's very heavily dependent on what you have here. So if you have a layer showing and a layer not showing, they will show automatically in your 3D map view. So if I turn on the vector layer here of the company buildings, you can see that we've got the company buildings. Once you've got the 3D map view open, you basically use these controls here, and I always get them the wrong way. It's very difficult to navigate with them. Oh, there we go. It's very difficult to navigate with them. I'm using my middle mouse button then pulled back to move it. Left mouse button pans, middle mouse button tips and rotates. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's not very 3D, surely. We can't see the buildings or anything there. Oh no, I don't want keyframes. Well, we do, but not till later. So if we go into configure, we'll get these options here, and we can set terrains and various stuff. Forgive me for humming and hawing like a noddy here a moment, but I seem to have lost the options to set the height of a layer. Okay. Oh no, that's right, sorry. Okay, try that again. Right, to set the options for the 3D of a layer, you need to be on the properties for the layer. And on the 3D view tab, you will have or you should have, the options to set the building heights. And again, this is going to make a liar out of me for some reason. Yikes. Now, I have this strange feeling that I have some memory problems here somewhere, because this has been playing up all afternoon. So hopefully it's not going to go completely tip up on me. Right, so single symbol mode. Right, okay, this is the one I was looking for. It threw me off for a bit there. Right, so in 3D mode, if you don't actually want something to appear in 3D, you want no symbols on. If you want something to appear in 3D, then you want your single symbol or your rule based. Now, your rule based, as we discussed in last month's session, when we use different rules to set different colours on objects based on things like the name or heights or such things like that, that's what your rule based's for. We're not going to cover that tonight. We're just going to do some simple heights. So let's set all the buildings here to 10. Now 10 is in the measurement system that you are using. In our case, remember our magic key PSG code 27700? That is meters. Our coordinates are in meters. So when we're moving around the map, we're in meters. And as a result, our heights and our extrusions are in meters. Now, the height is the height above the ground. So in this case, we actually want to change that back to 0, because we don't want buildings that hover above the map. Maybe you do, but in our case we don't. We want to extrude them. So we're going to make everything 10 meters high, and we're going to base it on the centroid. We're going to make it relative to the level it's on. So if you're on a piece of terrain, for example, where you've got different levels, then wherever the centre of the building is will be the position the heights are calculated from. And culling basically hides polygons that you can't see. To have different culling settings on will speed things up. So I'm just going to leave no culling for now until you get an idea of what this can do. And likewise, you can also add back faces. That's a bit of an advanced topic, so we'll not bother too much with that. Your diffused and your ambient are the actual colours. Now, without a little bit of theory in 3D, it's a bit difficult to understand what diffuse, ambient and specular are. All I will say, to try and keep it simple, is that your diffused colour is typically going to be the main colour of the object. Your ambient colour is basically the environment. So, for example, for those of you who've been outside in the fog, when you look at the fog has a solid misty colour, but you can walk through it. That solid misty colour, that's the ambient colour. The fog itself doesn't actually have a colour, but the ambient environment and the particles in the air make it look like it has a colour. And the specular colour is the reflective colour. So if you shine a very bright red light onto something, it will reflect some red light back. If you're in bright sunlight, it will reflect the colour of the sunlight back. If you're in a swimming pool, you get a blue reflection off the water, which is what makes the water look blue. For now, we're just going to go with the diffuse. You might actually have to muck around a little bit to get the colours right on here. Let's make this a green colour, I think, the diffuse, and we'll apply that. And if I bring my 3D view back in now, sorry, we've got to close it down. If I bring the 3D view back in, you'll now see that each of the blocks or each of the polygons that were in that, now have 10 meters of height on them. Now, as I said, the 3D view that's built into QGIS is very, very, very basic. Yeah, you can see that everything is 10 meters, including things that probably wouldn't be 10 meters. I mean, for example, the company offices here are nowhere near the same height as the power station. You know, the power station cooling towers here are not that flat. We all know this. You know, the chimneys that were where Generation Place stands now were not little tree stumps like that. And this is where your attributes come in. This was why I was keen to explain the different attributes and that to you yesterday. If you're going to make a 3D map from something, then typically what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to have a column in your data that shows the height of it. Now, you can see that here I've got an extrude column. I've got some other things as well, but I'm not really using them. But I've got an extrude column here. And at the moment, they're all set to 0. But what you can actually do, let's say, for example, there's number 1 plant. So we'll set number 1 plant. We'll need to put it into edit mode first. We'll set number 1 plant to be 50. Is it going to let me change that, or is it not going to let me change that? I don't think it is it? Okay. Not entirely sure why. But right, so it's going to make a fool out of me again. If we go into our extrusion, you remember when I covered attributes last month, we could pick various things out from here. So field type int, for example, we could go in there and we can set extrude to that. Now, because the extrude is set to 0 for all of my polygons there, and I can't change it for some reason, everything's been set to a 0 height. But as you can imagine, you can put different heights in there, and you could specify the building heights using an attribute in your dataset. Likewise, if we wanted to, for example, make parts of the building off the ground, we could set that there to another column, which I don't think, oh, maybe I do. No, it's a string. Okay, so I don't have anything in there that I could use, but we could, in theory, use one there as well to set the floating off the ground, so to speak. I want to turn that off, please. Yeah, you're not going to let me, are you? Oh, are you? No? Oh, there we go. So, for example, if we set this to 5, and we set this to 5, you just got to imagine for now that these are coming from columns within your data set from attributes that you've added. Then you can see when I bring the 3D map back up that things are now actually hovering off the ground as opposed to being on the ground. So you could, for example, if we use the coal transporter here, you could set the building to be 0 as its altitude and have 0 as its height, and set its extrusion as, say, I think that had a large tower on the side if I remember from the photographs, so you could set its extrusion to, say, maybe 50 meters, and then you could set this bit here to something like maybe 2 meters and have it maybe, say, 5 meters, and then that would actually draw things properly with the building on the ground, but the conveyor in the air, suspended in the air between that and possibly one of the towers, or some trellises that you might actually draw here. You can treat different layers different ways. So if we just drag this back out again for a moment and go back into the properties, we'll set this back to something simple. So we could say, right, everything on our company layer is going to be 15 meters. So we'll OK that. And then everything that's on this building layer here, we're going to set to 5 meters. And we'll give this a nice pink colour, or a dark pink colour anyway, at least. And then what you'll find when we do that, if we just sort of move over to the town centre a bit, where we have our town centre buildings there, you can see now from the 3D view that we've got a much larger company model compared to the size of the buildings that make up the regular building layer. So you can, as well as using attributes and things like that, you can put different buildings on different layers. You know, you could make all of your houses be a uniform height. You could make all of your company buildings be a uniform height. You could put your railway stations in another layer. You could put chimneys in one layer. And that also allows you to give things different colours. Now, last but not least, we can also add what's called a terrain to this. Unfortunately, terrains in the built-in 3D view don't work awfully well. And to add that, we'll go in here and we'll change this to Dem Raster layer. And then that will give us another box underneath which lets us select which of our raster datasets we want to use as a dem. Now in my case, I've got this Land Ranger DTM loaded in here. The vertical scale, we're going to increase it a little bit, just to 1.5, make it a little bit more, make it half as big as it should be. And we're just going to leave the rest as it is. We're not going to touch the terrain shading or anything, or the lights. We'll just leave them at default. And if we OK that, we should hopefully not get a lockup. Please tell me that's not locked up and it's just busy working something out. There, yes it is. So what we've actually got here, although it's a little hard to tell, let's see if zooming out helps. There we go. You can see roughly, I know it's not a very good picture, but you can see roughly as it improves, there's a bit of a slope on the side here. Now if you know the outline of the town, you'll know that this is Delves Lane coming down here. So that's the new Delves estate, Woody Close, all that lot going down that way, down towards Greenways. That is the engine sheds and the brick sheds there, and you can see the slope in the landscape. Now I don't know if I can get in too well, but there you go. Yeah, so that's not too bad. You can see there that we've got the buildings up on the top. Now I'm not too sure, but I think, oh right, okay, no, sorry, my mistake. I know how to do this now. If we just drag this off now, and we'll put this layer on underneath here. This is the standard Ordnance Survey Land Ranger map. It's not as high a resolution as the one that I normally use, my WMS layer, but it matches the actual terrain, the DTM that I've loaded. So I just turn that on now. There we go. It's drawing. So if I pull the 3D view back up now, you can see that we've actually got a 3D layer that we can move around, that we can view, and you can see that all the houses coming down the pit bungalows there are all stepped because they're on the hillside. And you can see if we move up that these buildings up here are very much definitely much higher than the ones above. And you can see there. Now this is a typical error that you will see when you're working with the built-in 3D mode. I'll try and get in a bit closer. You can see that that building there appears to be hovering, and the reason for that is because its centroid is on a point underneath that you can't see. The building's extruded height is measured from the centroid, but the actual underlying terrain it's got quite a steep curve in it at that point. So because of that steep curve, the terrain actually peels away from under the building. Now if that was divided up into lots of little blocks, and each of those little blocks was a separate 3D object in its own right, that would actually mold itself to the terrain. But you really don't want to do that, because if you're going to do a 3D map like this, what you want to do is you want to have the least number of sides on an object possible. So your shapes really need to be as simple as you can possibly get them. If you do that, then you will draw them pretty fast, and as you can see there, it really is quite smooth. I probably don't have to say this, but having a good graphics card for doing things like this really will help. You know? Now unfortunately the resolution of the 3D DTM that I'm using here is not really that great. I think it's something like 25k, 1 in 250. So that hill there that is there because of the new footbridge that they put over the bypass now is giving a false impression, if you like, of what the landscape where the houses and the Traveller's Rest is. But it's not bad, considering that we are using a very basic version of it. Now, I said there's two ways of doing 3D. That 3D module, if you're going to use it, really is just for previewing within QGIS itself. Actually, I shouldn't have closed that down yet. If I open this back up, just give it a second to redraw itself. "3D windows, when you close them down, by the way, they recycle themselves from scratch. So if you close one down and then open a new 3D view, you will have to wait for it to redraw itself. If you want to help it draw faster, then zoom in a bit is usually the way to speed it up. So you can see there's the company training centre, which was definitely not 15 metres in height, but we can be forgiven since this is just a demonstration. What was I going to do? Yes, I can't remember what I was going to show you again now. Right, okay, well, we'll close that back down, we'll move on. Oh, yes, that's what I was going to show you. Of course I remember when I've closed it down. I'm not going to open it again. You briefly saw it before when I clicked on the play button, and that was the keyframe thing. So if you wanted to do, say, an animated fly round of your model, you can actually draw out a 2D path using the 2D normal map geometry, and then you can use the 3D view to set keyframes, and you can fly your camera around the model, and I believe you can also save the keyframe out to a model. Now myself personally, I never use that. Very rarely do I use it, because I normally use the next 3D one that I'm going to show you. Now I'm going to try and run this without restarting this first. So let's see if this will work. Now, before I actually launch this one, this is a plugin. It's called QGIS to 3GS. Okay. Now I know Dave Weston's in there, and I know for a fact he'll know what 3GS is. 3GS is a 3D library for JavaScript, and because it's for JavaScript, it means it runs in the browser. To get this second 3D view, you need to find it in the plugins. So I'll just give that a second. If you remember, you've seen the various plugins a few times over some of the sessions we've done. Okay. Why are you... Oh, I must have told it to upgrade them all. That wasn't really what I wanted to do. Okay. But you'll see there it is there, QGIS to 3GS, and obviously I have evidently just upgraded it without meaning to. But in order to make use of this one, it does have to be installed separately from QGIS. And you can just install it using the manager. Once it's installed, you'll find it here on the web QGIS to 3GS menu. And as I was expecting, if you've been using the other 3D view, it won't work. In fact, what you'll get is you'll get this rather strange message here. Nothing rendered, there's a compatibility issue. And that's exactly why you can't use the built-in 3D way of doing things and then go and use this one. So we will have to bin this. As I say, I did try to run two of them together earlier, but it really didn't want to know anything. Don't ask me questions about the background picture. I ain't got a clue. It's just one I picked at random from the many that I've got on my disk. I just thought it would look better and make a much more suitable background since we were joining in directly via YouTube. While I am waiting for that other version or the other copy of QGIS to load, we'll just have a look in the YouTube panel here. Any questions from anyone? Doesn't look like it. Feel free to type something in there if you wish. No? Okay. Well, we'll switch back to my presentation then. So we'll reopen our previous project. Right. So using the other one is very similar to using the built-in one, but there are a number of differences. First off, you get this sort of layer thing at the side. Everything is configured from within here. Yeah, everything is done within the plugin window. You don't have to keep going back to 2D mode in QGIS and setting things on the actual layer itself. So that means we can actually do this. We can set this as the full screen application if we like. Also, we can have multiple DEMs. So if you've got, as we have here, which is the actual landscape, and if you've also got a layer loaded in with some customized stuff, For example, what I've done, I don't have it loaded here, but what I've done, many of you know that I've been trying to remodel the canyon road and the bit going down into the works and rebuilding the landscape around here where it was destroyed and dug out. I actually have another layer that I usually include on top of this. And then it draws this layer, then it draws the other stuff on top, and it gives it that extra bit. I don't have that tonight, but I'm sure as you look at that, you can actually pick things out on there from around the town. There, for example, is the road going round the back of Temple Town. I think, anyway, that's the bypass round there somewhere. And we may have Genesis Way around here. It is still difficult to tell, but you can clearly see that that is respective of a landscape. And this is the other good thing about the QGS to 3GS exporter. You can play around with this and you can see in real time as you make alterations, whereas you can't typically do that with the built-in one. And if you do that with the built-in one, you really need two display screens with your map on one and QGIS on the other so that you can observe the differences. Let's try putting... Oh, there we go. So this is an interesting thing, by the way. Anything can be used as a 3D landscape, including a colour photograph. You know, I could load a picture of my face in here, and each of the different coloured pixels would be represented as a different height. Now, this is actually the colour map that you're looking at, and it's using what's called indexed colour, which means all the roads are one colour, all the B roads are another colour, the grid lines are yet another colour, but they're all a consistent singular colour. So what tends to happen is you get this rather weird looking landscape of things that are a fairly uniform height, and it can be used to do some interesting stuff. Now, what I was actually looking at is to see where the scene is, because we can actually put on here a flat scene. I think putting the flat scene on might be the one thing that we need to go into QGIS itself for. So in the scene settings, we'll just have a quick look down here. Material type, Lambert material. Okay, these are all different rendering types. I'm not going to explain them. If you want to know what they are, go and look up some information on 3D graphics on computers. It can get quite involved with things like Phong shading and Toon shading and Lambert and all that. It's all to do with different reflections and things like that. Okay, I think I do need to go back into QGIS itself just a moment to get that on there. So we'll turn on the actual land range. Yes, I did have to do that. Okay, so to get your base map, you need to turn that on in QGIS. But anything on top of that comes from within QGIS to 3GS Explorer. And you can see now that I've turned that on, that we actually have quite a detailed and quite an interesting smooth map to look at. I mean, even if you're just looking at normal 2D maps and not bothering with 3D geometry, you can use this to get a good idea of the land. If you were a geologist, for example, and you wanted to see where something had maybe changed in two different versions of a map. What we can also do if we go into properties for a given layer itself, we can set different things like the colour of the sides of the box, the quality of the texture, whether we've got shading, things like that on. Oh, look, there's the actual. I knew the material display was somewhere. That's the one I was actually looking for instead of going into QGIS and turning it on. I think it's in the actual scene settings, the setting that I'm looking for right now. There it is. So if you remember in the built-in 3D one, we exaggerated things by 1.5. So that's what the vertical exaggeration is for here. So you can see there, that's actually boosted things up a bit. So if you really want to get a good view of all the bumps and lumps, this is the number you want to be changing. Let's do something crazy like exaggerated by ×4. And that's actually gone and that's screwed up our camera because it's bumpified it so much. But it really does, when you do that, highlight just how much of a hill Concert is actually sat on top of. I'm sure straight away you can see that this is Concert Park Bank coming down here in all its glory, down to the bottom of Genesis Way, and you can see that Genesis Way itself has got quite a steep one, you know. Round the back, where the railway line used to come through, the old tin mill roads there. Now, if you remember, the engineering workshops used to sit on this plinth here, just behind the houses that are at the bottom of Concert Park Bank, coming round into Labanum Avenue. And you spin round, you can see where they've dug a lot of stuff out. There, for example, is the drop that used to go down into the back of number 1 plant. And that's the hillside behind Tesco's where the blast furnaces were dug into. Now, we'll change that back to something somewhat more sensible for now. I do only have a small section of this map showing, by the way, in case you're wondering. That is a much larger map, and it does have a lot more DTM on, but oh, okay. Dave Weston, not sure if jumping ahead a bit. How do you achieve pitch roofs? You don't. Not using any of the tools that are built into QGIS anyway. That, my friend, is a subject for a completely different episode, because at some time in the future I will be taking you outside of QGIS and then I'll be showing you how I actually did the detailed modelling using various other items of software that are dedicated to doing the 3D. Within this and within QGIS itself, though, you don't get that level of detail, not unless you actually draw two separate. Well, actually, you would have to draw more than two separate objects. You'd have to draw a whole row of objects that were thin, but the width of your building, and then their centres would have to sort of sit on the ground at different layers, different levels, different heights. You could do that, but it would be a lot of work, it would be a lot of polygons, and it would take quite some computing power to draw it. So, right, anyway, moving on with this view. So you can see that this particular module is very, very useful for looking at the maps themselves in 3D. It's very fluid, it's very easy to steer compared to the built-in 3D view, and it's great just for overlaying a standard 2D map. This, however, can also do a lot of the stuff that the built-in 3D view can. So if we take our buildings layer, for example, and let it recalculate, and we should be able to open the properties for that. We know it's a polygon layer, we've told it's a polygon layer. Our mode should be absolute, or no, relative to the DTM layer, and we will make everything 5 meters high, just like we did with the other map. Again, you have your function calculator here, so you can set it to, you can actually do a lot more with the functions in this, because you get your expression calculator up, as I showed you in previous sessions, and you can use things like the date and time fields, files, you can read other geometry, you can do actual GIS operations, and you can do some really clever stuff using the function editor in this one. For now, we'll fix them at 5. And if this has worked, well, the blue bar is going up there, so I can assume that it's doing something. So we'll just give it a moment to calculate this, and hopefully, fingers crossed, I'm going to have a drink of my tea here while it does it. Just in case you're wondering, this is why people like me always have a cup on our desk, because there's always something that takes half an hour to calculate. And it's also the reason why the cup that's sat on our desk is usually stone cold by the time we get around to drinking it. Yes, I can hear you all chuckling at that. I can't really, but I'm just trying to fill in the gaps while this blue bar ticks its way up. I think the words paint and drying spring to mind here. Is it still doing stuff, or is it not, or has it just gone ridiculously slow? It really is difficult to tell sometimes. Well, I can still move this around, so I think it's just gone ridiculously slow. Maybe what I should have done is picked a simpler file to demonstrate this with, but I thought it was probably about time that we started using much of the geometry that we've been working with. You can see some of the polygons are loaded in there. So what are we doing here? It is still going, it's creeping along at a very, very glacial pace, unfortunately. So there's not really an awful lot I can do about that. But you can see that we do have the various polygons in there. That's the old garage that was where Aldi sits now, I believe. There's the Sunday school. Oh, that's apparently finished. So the blue bar's gone, but we don't actually... no, hang on. I wonder if this is the same as the other one. I think I've just messed this one up, actually. So let's go back to the options for that layer, because I think I might have just set the Z. Yes, I have. So that's the Z coordinate, not the actual height. So I apologise for that, folks. I've just made you sit and wait for nothing. That Z coordinate is analogous to the height option in the built-in 3D mode. There we go. Object type, polygon, extruded or overlay. So we want this changed to extruded, and we're going to put that back down to 0, and just to make sure that I haven't missed anything. So yes, it's this one here, I believe. Height, and we're just going to set that to 5. Let's not show the edges just for the moment. Let's see how this goes this time. Ah, there we go. Finally, at last. So we'll just move this off a moment, just so we can see our map again. You can see that doing the 3D is somewhat faster as well. I don't know why it took so long just to do a normal 2D one. But again, you can see, just as with the built-in 3D stuff, that all of our blocks are relative to the actual height of the landscape as well. There we go. Yeah, I thought I'd changed the orbit. Right, that's better. No, I don't want to do that. Stop doing that. Yeah, this is one thing that will annoy you, by the way. Once you switch the orbit mode on, the auto orbit mode, you can't switch it off. So you'll see there, as soon as I let go and stop dragging it, it starts rotating. Yeah, and there is no way for me to switch that off, unfortunately. But we can deal with that. So you can see that we have our 3D geometry on there, and if I turn on the company buildings as well, just like we did with the built-in height, we can also give the company buildings an extruded height as well. So we'll make them 15. Why not? Just as we did with the other one. Again, just like you can with the built-in one, you can use the expression, the features, and that's built into them. You can also give them different colours and different features, independent from the actual colouring that you've got on your layers and things in QGIS itself. So when, interestingly enough, I don't know why that hasn't put the company buildings on. There should be a lot of stuff in there, in that area at least. That's peculiar. I've got those set the same, well, that's the building layer, isn't it? I had them set that same way. So properties, just make sure we haven't missed anything here. Yeah, we've got them set to that. Okay, we'll just go with the feature style. Okay, that's peculiar. Oh, hang on. There we go. That might be why. Ah, there we go. Oh, well, that is interesting. Oh, that's why, because I've got that set to absolute, haven't I? Right, okay. Uloon, Mr. Shaw. There we go. So now we'll try that again. We'll set that to random. There we go. So all of our company buildings now are drawing in different colours. So you can start to see as well that if you were doing, say, a polling graph for polling stations or something like that, you could use the 3D module to show 3D stats for different areas of a town, things like that. And you could have some pretty bonny colours in there as well, I guess, if you really, really wanted to. I wish you would stop putting the dialogues down there. So if we, we'll just change that now so that it doesn't hang out over the sides. The last style that you might want to change here was something that I could have changed before, but I chose not to. And you're probably going to want to do that, put the edge colour on when you're working with them so that you can see your different blocks, if you like, because the one thing you will find working with both of the 3D modules is that because it's a single uniform colour and you cannot put a texture on the actual geometry that you're displaying in your map, it tends to blur into one. I mean, you can see just here, you can see how much easier it is to see the company buildings versus the normal buildings there. And that's largely it. The one last thing that you would probably find that you will really like with this 3D one is that the scene can be exported to a website. So you can see I've actually slowed that right down now, so let's just turn that off. It wouldn't be so bad if I could turn off this bloody orbit thing, you know, but you can't. Like I say, once you've turned it on, you cannot turn it off. It is a pest, so don't double click on your map unless you want to turn the damn thing on. And you can see it does make working with it difficult because it's going and spinning all the time, and it really slows down what you're trying to do. So anyway, we go to export to the web, and we're just going to call it that. Where shall we put it? We'll put it on my desktop. We'll create a folder. You really are going to want to put this in a folder. What you would normally do is you would put this in a folder, then you would FTP the folder up to your website. So we'll call this map test, and we will select said folder, and we'll just make a copy of it so that we can go back to that in a minute, and then we'll hit the export button and it'll do all its stuff that it needs to. It will only export what you can see in the view as well. And you can see, of course, it's slowed right down because the damn thing will not stop orbiting. So, of course, now the computer's trying to animate it and export it at the same time. Right, so there we go. So I now close this and then close that view down, and let's just find that folder that I've just created. There it is, map test, and you'll see in this folder I've got a web page and some other webby type stuff, JavaScript files and graphics and things. If I click on that, okay, so it's not going to work if I click on it locally, and that's because of security in the browser, unfortunately. So you will need access to a web server to test this. I forget about that every bleeding time, if I'm being honest. So if I just bring that off there, can I quickly put this on a website? No, not within the time that I've got here, because I've been here nearly an hour already, so I haven't got time to put it onto an actual web server. But honestly, everything that you saw in the preview view there would appear in a web page. That's not how I did the Concert Steel site. I used a similar plugin for the Concert Steel site, but one that only does 2D maps. But I could have, had I wanted to, build that 3D model, and I could have put it online, and I think it's probably going to be something that we will do over the course of the coming months and something like that with the History of Concert Steelworks website. If I can find somewhere suitable to put this map that we made as a demo after I finish this session, then I will do so, and then I will post the link in the discussion or the event notification on the Facebook group, and then you can all go and have a look at it in the browser. For now, just to finish off today, however, I have one more thing that I would like to cover. And I know this is going to be something that will be of particular use to the guys from the Land of Oak and Iron, which is why I prepared it ahead of time. You remember I mentioned having a DTM. So essentially this is what a DTM looks like. DTM means digital terrain model. This is a view that most people never really stop to think of or look at about Concert, but if we look at it, you can see that Concert's actually built on this plateau here. That bit going out there is the road going out to Lobley Hill, and this flat bit coming down here and then coming down the valley side comes down to Lanchester. That gap there is Hounsgill, where the Gill Viaduct is, and that's the River Derwent going down through Shotley, which, if you work it out, Black Hill Bank goes down this almost cliff-like side here. If you have a really, really, really good resolution on these things, then you can get in and you can see all sorts of detail. This, as I said before, is just a 1 in 25. It's a 25k one, hence Concert Land Range 25k. And I'm using it because it is a smaller data set, it is got less details in it, and it is faster to render for the purposes of demonstration. However, what you can do is you can also get contour sets. Now this contour set here is actually the official 25k version of that DTM, and these contour lines here are what were generated from that DTM, or the DTM was generated from them. I can't quite remember. Now anybody who knows how to read a map will know that looking at a set of contours like this can tell you a great deal about the landscape, particularly how steep that side is. You can tell by how close the contour lines are together. What you can also do is you can pick out the flat plateaus. So here, for example, is where most of the steelworks were, and that is where most of the slag tip that was behind the Grove and along Pemberton Road was. You can also see the flattened areas coming down through here where the road comes down, and you can see Hounsgill right there. More importantly, if we scroll in here, you can see that this appears to be a bit jagged around here. Now, unless you actually knew what you were looking at, you wouldn't realise what you were looking at. I know that sounds a bit backward, but when you look at contours, as I say, contours can tell you a lot about the area that you're studying. And that is actually Hounsgill Caves, the sandstone quarry along by the Gill Bridge. Now I'll show you, as a little bonus to what I'm demonstrating here after we've dealt with the this last subject of contours, although maybe not, I probably don't have time to load it in. I actually have a 1 meter resolution of these that was produced by DEFRA. You may have seen some screenshots of it in the group where I've showed sort of some of the landscape studies. And that really does show just what the extent of all this was here that's been dug out. And you can see there's sort of the valley going round and down to Nitsley there. Steep sides, and we've got a very big sort of flat chunk. It's not difficult to miss. However, what's more important with contour lines, or the other thing you can do with contour lines, is if you mark these up with the proper attributes, you can make use of them to produce 3D landscapes. So if I select my contour layer and I use my info tool here just to select that, it'll tell me that that has an attribute called ELEV at 240. If I select this one here, it'll tell me that one's at 195. 200, 205, and so on. So each of these contours is 5 meters apart. This is the 5 meter contour set. And what you can do is you can use your vector tool. I think it's no, it might be under raster. I'm going to there we go. Oh no, sorry, that's right. Okay, so I'm getting ahead of myself here. I'm doing this the wrong way around. What we can actually do is we can take the DTM, my apologies, and we can use the raster plugins and we can extract the contour set from them. Now, I'm not going to go through and do that because it does, quite frankly, take a long time to do. But that there is how you create that vector set from the raster. So you can tell it how many meters you want between the contour lines. You can tell it what you want the attribute to be called, all that kind of stuff. And the other way, I'm humming and hawing because I forget exactly where it is. Yeah, the contour, that's for point geometries. I'll explain that one in a moment. There is another one here somewhere, but I can't for the life of me remember where it's gone. Projection, no, it's not under there. Okay, I'm not going to spend... No, it's not that one. I'm not going to spend the next half an hour trying to find it just to give you 30 seconds worth of demonstration. Unfortunately, I can't find the plugin. It is here somewhere, but I've got that many loaded that it could be on any of these menus. But what you can do is you can take these vectors. If you've drawn these by hand, let's say, for example, if we were to load this back in, you can see that we have orange contour lines on there. So what you can do is you could create yourself a 2D layer and trace round these contours, and then you could create, and eventually you would end up creating yourself a polygon layer that looks somewhat like this, and then with the ELV parts on, you can turn that into a 3D height map like that, and that height map can then be used to create a DTM, digital terrain model, to use with the 3D mapping features that are available in the application. And I think we'll stop that there because that's been about an hour. Before we do we have any other do we have any others in there? My favourite quote: "I turn caffeine into code." Gill Caves. Dave Weston, you're a native and you don't know the Gill Caves? Come on, my friend. Richard, feel free to jump in here. I think we need to have some kind of a road trip down there now that the weather's starting to get better. It's a lot of the old sandstone buildings. If you go along towards the Grey Horse, along that way, and some of the ones along Medhamsley Road, you'll see there's a lot of sandstone buildings in the town, and the stone for them was mostly extracted and dug out of the Gill Caves, the quarry round by Gill Viaduct. So, any other questions? Do you want to type them in there? Yes? No? Oh. I have never been, so would love that. So you've never actually been down to the Gill Caves either, Richard? Wow. That really does surprise me. It was one of my favourite playgrounds when I was a nipper. We used to run around and get up to all sorts of crazy stuff down there. Um, okay, so we'll have to organise that, I guess. Wow, yep, we'll definitely. It was in response to the odd shape. Okay, well, I'll tell you what. We'll chat about this some other time because we're getting to the point now where I'm starting to run out of stuff that I can teach you guys in QGIS. Once I've had a couple more sessions sort of with other applications and some of the external stuff to this, we're getting to the point where we'll need to start sort of forming a team to put some of this stuff into reality and start doing some interesting stuff with it. I don't believe so, but I could be wrong. I watched a documentary on Newcastle not too long ago about that, and I think he mentioned that the stone for the high level bridge came from Ponteland somewhere. But again, I could be wrong on that. I'm no expert. Right, I'm going to end the stream there. So in about 5 seconds after me clicking this button, I will vanish from the interwebs. And this should remain permanently on YouTube for you to go and look back. And what's more, the chat thing should replay. Of course, as always, if you want to bug me about something, grab me in the Facebook group, come and ask questions. I will try putting that map online for you to have a look at and see what the web output produces. And I will see if I can put together some screen grabs of the really high resolution stuff. I know I was showing Richard some screenshots in the admin chat for the Facebook group of where the caves and that are and where it's all been dug out, and it really is some high resolution stuff. So I'll see if I can find those images and I'll post them in the group as well. Until next time, stay curious and go and do some mapping. Bye for now.